So, okay, part two of the GMS Magazine podcasts. We're back. So, what's the next topic? What's the next topic?
Well, this one's going to be an interesting one, and this is more a curiosity. And it was actually a question. Um, there are lots of game designers making tons of games. Sometimes they're creating original mechanics, and sometimes they're copying mechanics from other games. And sometimes you'll play a game, and then you'll realize sometimes before you start playing, maybe you've played the game all the way through and you lost or won, and maybe you're playing the game for the first time, and halfway through you figure something out. You figure out a strategy
Mm-hmm.
that's like, oh, if I do this, I'm gonna win. And then the next time you play the game, you follow that strategy, and then you win. And whether or not you tell your friends that or not is another is a point of conversation. Do you say, by the way, if you do this strategy, you're basically winning, or or you do that because you're like, as everyone's going, oh, you chose that strategy, and then you realize, man, if I'd followed that strategy, and I can give out numerous examples of well-known games that I love because I know I can beat people with a certain strategy.
Such
Does
as?
that make it a bad game? I'll give
No,
examples, but
no, it doesn't make it a bad game. But give me examples.
okay. So a couple examples. I'll make some smaller ones and some big ones. One of my favorite games of all time is a game called Alien Frontiers. It is a
Yes,
die placing game.
love it.
Now, you start off with 3 dice. You can have upwards of 5. On your turn, you roll your dice and you place them, which means the more dice you have, the more things you get.
Sure.
Which means it should be 100% your priority to always get your additional dice and do that as soon as possible. Some people, they roll their dice and go, oh, I can get this resource, I can get this resource, resource. My thing is that I have to go as early as possible. If I can go first, it would be great. And the first thing I do, no matter what, I have to get on to the function to unlock my 4th player. And that's like, you have to. And if I can get it early enough, 2 or 3 turns before other people, I have that much of a leverage advantage that I'm probably going to win the game. The sooner I can get those extra dice before you is an example. Now that's a minor one. I have a game here called, let's see if I can get it out here, called Railroad Tycoon.
Yep.
No, Railroad Revolution. Railroad Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a game where you're building railroads across America. This is not like Ticket to Ride. It's a little different. But there is another function. Yes, you can spend a good chunk of the game laying down train tracks and so forth. But one of the things is this telegraph network that runs across the bottom. It seems like a side function.
Mm-hmm.
The game spends so much of its resources in the rail network. It thinks that spending your efforts trying to develop the telegraph network is secondary, considering it takes up 10% of the board and is only a side function. Except when I was reading up on this game, I was reading comments. Someone says, like, if you focus on the telegraph, you will win this game. And I'm like, that can't be true. And so when I played the game for the first time, I followed that strategy and I destroyed. I completely annihilated anybody because I focused entirely on the telegraph network and not on the rails. Another example is a game called Kanban. One of the lesser known games on Vital Lacerda, who does stuff like Vinhos or a bunch of other stuff. There was a really well known, if somewhat infamous, Kanban EV remake, which upped the game's production value, added electric cars, and tripled the price of the game. I have the regular version, thank you. I've been doing fine. And it's one of those really meaty original games where I'm like, this is just crazy. And that one is you're laying down meeples, and each meeple has a huge section of the board that you can access. And it has basically the whole part of the game is you're building, you're designing cars, and you're putting cars into prototype, into production. Mm-hmm. And you're running a factory in Japan dedicated to this. And you have to be the most efficient supervisor. And you have a boss who basically tells you when you score points and when the game ends. And there is this little tiny section of the board which allows you to put licenses, and licenses give you just a couple additional benefits. Well, I was reading about the game, and I played the game 2 or 3 times with my wife, and we were doing well, and she was doing well, and I was doing well. And then I think it was my second time or third time playing. Someone said, "Just go for licenses. Don't bother with the cars. Don't bother with the 80% of the board. Focus entirely on getting licenses." So I'm like, okay. So I did, and I annihilated the game. I completely ran away with the victory because I realized that was a strategy. To a lesser degree, I think about games like Tapestry. If you have some people like sometimes you randomize which civilization card you get and which kind of empire. Like there's two. There's one that tells you basically how your civilization works for the whole game, and then you get a little card that tells you how your first era plays out. Oh yeah, also in your map board, the board that shows you basically how where you build your empire. Um, and some people like here's three and pick one, and I like doing that. But if you know the game very well, you can look at your options and go, well, if I put these two together, I win the game. And there was one time I mentioned it to when we were interviewing Jamie Stegmeyer that there was a combination where I looped the point tracker 3 times. I ended the game at 600 points when the game generally thinks that the best type of player will end the game at 300 and something points. I got it at 400 or 500 points. I literally had twice as many points as my wife. Does that make it a bad game? Because some people have criticized Tapestry because of how unbalanced it could be depending on which cards you get.
I don't know if I would say that that makes it a bad game, but it makes it a potentially, for me at least, very boring game, for two reasons. And is one, where's the challenge? I mean, if you already have a winning strategy, why would I play that game if I already know how to win it? And secondly, how absolutely idiotic would I feel if somebody else saw the same thing and outrun me and won because they've been better at applying the same technique as me, and then I would feel like a pillock. So I don't think I would enjoy that at all. But I don't think that would make it a bad game. It's just a very easily winnable game. I remember there was a controversy about a Martin Wallace game a few years ago. I can't remember. Was it Death in the Snow or something similar?
Mm-hmm. I don't know the game, but go on.
I don't know. I'm just thinking that was the name, but I can't remember it at all. And there was this thing about if you do this, you win the game. That's it, done. There's no way to stop you. And people thought, why would anybody play this game? It automatically becomes a race to beat that strategy, and there's no point in trying anything else. So the game very quickly becomes very boring because why would you do anything else? So I don't think it makes it bad. It just makes it a lot more or less playable, I guess.
Like I know, for example, I know two examples. One, I'll bring up my own game, Naramata, the board game I designed. It's not a specific focus. I talked about these two games would have specific parts of the board that are smaller and seemingly less focused. And if you focus on them, you gain a strategy. With Naramata, there's two methods to play the game. One is that you get tourists, you try to make them happy, and as you play the game, you'll slowly improve your ride. The other strategy is intentionally take a point deficit and lose the game for at least one of the 3 rounds that you play the game. Let the other players get ahead of you while you spend all your resources developing your ride and making your vehicle more powerful, so that later in the game, where everyone's still moving at a meager pace, because you spent all your resources improving your ride, you almost exponentially zip past them on the last day because you have such a better engine. You can develop that engine and score past them. And I've actually watched people play the game, and I've looked at other players, and as a third person, I'm not actually a player in the game, and I'm seeing people play the game, and I would write down at the beginning of the game, this person's going to win the game. And that's the person that had that strategy, who focused entirely on developing their car rather than just trying to score points at the beginning of the game. If you spend your resources entirely focusing on that ride, to the point where if I see this person's in last place on the end of day 1, they have a better engine, they're going to win the game on day 3. And that's exactly what happened. Um, the other one, which I thought was humorous, was a game called Sheriff of Nottingham.
Mm-hmm.
Very famous game. It's a bluffing game. And the whole idea is that you're supposed to, you're trying to smuggle items into Nottingham, and the sheriff has to, if he calls your bluff and it turns out you're not bluffing, you get points. If he calls your bluff and you were bluffing, he gets the points,
Mm-hmm.
and then the judge changes. And then statistically, it was shown that the best way to win the game is to never bluff. Is to always tell the truth every single time. Because at some point the sheriff is going to call you out, and they're going to call you out, and at some point, so because if the sheriff, if you have 3 cards and he doesn't call you out, then you get those 3 cards. If he calls you out and it turns out you're telling the truth, you get to keep those cards. So you always deny the sheriff points if you're telling the truth and not trying to bluff your way. And when Tabletop, the show that Will Wheaton did, the person who won the game handedly never lied about what they were trying to smuggle in. They were 100% honest every single time, and they never lied, and they won the game. And I always thought that was a very fascinating examination. At the end of the day, if you are honest, you have a much greater chance of winning the game compared to if you were being dishonest. I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, I think what happens if everybody knows that and everybody's being truthful? Who wins?
Exactly. It's a strategy that works as long as people are paranoid, but you're still telling the truth. It actually relies on people's assumption that you are going to lie, but you don't. If everyone's truthful, then it just comes.
Exactly.
It becomes a crapshoot of whoever just brings in the best product.
Well, I don't know if those games are bad. I don't think they're inherently bad, but I don't think I would want to be playing those games for long. To be honest, I think I would get bored very, very quickly.
So you don't. So this is the correct question. You don't like playing games that you know you're going to win?
No, I don't.
Because a lot of people do.
I don't.
I have to admit, there's a part of me. I mean, I like Alien Frontiers, but that's because I win all the time.
It doesn't bring me any joy to win without a challenge. I mean,
I would like to hear people who do listen or see the videos, the comment. Do you enjoy a game less or more if you think you have a better chance of winning because you know of a particular strategy? Like I'm not like cheating. Obviously, that doesn't count. I'm talking about, do you find a game more enjoyable because you know how to win at it?
Well, let's wait and hope the people will answer that question. I really find it interesting. I wonder, because it would give us an insight as to why people play.
Well, why people? That's why the best chess players plays chess. So they're winning in the vast majority of the game. Obviously, they love winning, and they're really good at chess. Now, there's no secret strategy. There's tons of strategies to chess. That's why it's chess.
But if that were the case, then they would just be playing with bad players. If all they want is to win, then they would just go to a chess club and obliterate everybody, and they would be winning 20 games in one afternoon and feel, ha ha ha, I won 20 times. Or go to a high school and play with children. And then say, ha ha ha, I won to children. I don't think that's the only reason they do it.
Oh, I think, but we do see situations where they try to quote unquote challenge themselves through various reasons. But like I said, it's a very, that's the question. That's the question I'm curious about, whether or not your enjoyment of a game and your adherence, your loyalty to a game is at all adjusted by the fact that you're really good at it. And potentially know a strategy. It's not just being good at it, but having a strategy that will give you an edge going into the game.
But that is not being good at the game, is it?
Yeah, I know. That's why I corrected myself. That's the question. It's not about, because people love games that they're good at. I mean, obviously, that if you should be good at it. That's kind of how chess works: so strategy and counter strategy. I'm talking specifically about games that of a particular tactic that will give you an edge. It's not cheating, but you just know something that the other players don't, that will allow you to win the game.
Well, I look forward to people's answers to that question. Shall we jump on to part 3? Do you have another topic, or are we going straight to my review?
No, those were my topics. Ah, God, bloody hell, those games are heavy.
Okay.
Onto part 3.
Okay.